stop right there. If you're a green card holder, if you're on a visa, or if you're planning to travel internationally in 2026, what I'm about to tell you could completely change your plans. The Trump administration has just announced sweeping immigration updates that are sending shockwaves through the immigrant community. New visa bans, stricter travel rules, and changes that could affect millions of people are now in effect or coming very soon. If you don't know about these changes, you could find yourself stranded at the border, denied re-entry, or worse, losing your immigration status entirely. So don't click away, because the next few minutes could save you from making a costly, potentially life-altering mistake. Welcome back to US Visa Info, the channel that brings you critical information about immigration, pensions, benefits, and everything that affects your financial security and legal status. I'm here to cut through the noise, break down complex policy changes, and give you actionable information you can actually use. Today, we're diving deep into the Trump immigration updates for 2026, specifically focusing on the new visa ban and the dramatically changed travel rules for green card holders. This isn't speculation. This isn't political commentary. These are real policy changes that are already affecting people's lives. So, grab a notepad, settle in, and pay close attention, because what you learn in the next several minutes could be absolutely crucial. Let me start by giving you the context you need to understand why these changes are happening and why they're so significant. Immigration policy in the United States has always been a political battleground, but the changes we're seeing in 2026 represent some of the most dramatic shifts in decades. The Trump administration has made immigration restriction a centerpiece of its policy agenda, and these new measures are the latest manifestation of that approach. Unlike previous changes that primarily affected new applicants or specific visa categories, these 2026 updates reach deep into the existing immigrant population, affecting people who have been living, working, and building lives in the United States for years. The first major component of these updates is what's being called the expanded visa ban, though it's actually much broader and more complex than that simple label suggests. Let me break down exactly what this means. The original travel ban from the first Trump administration focused primarily on certain Muslim-majority countries and was subject to numerous legal challenges. This new version takes a different approach. It's broader in scope, but more carefully constructed to withstand legal scrutiny. The 2026 visa ban targets what the administration calls high-risk countries, a designation based on a combination of factors, including security concerns, lack of cooperation with U.S. immigration enforcement, and what they term visa overstay rates. The list of affected countries is longer than many people expected and includes not just obvious candidates, but also some nations that surprised immigration experts. We're talking about restrictions affecting nationals from more than 20 countries across Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and even some Eastern European nations. But here's what makes this different from previous bans, and what you absolutely need to understand. This isn't just about preventing new people from coming to the United States. The 2026 regulations also affect people who already have valid visas, including green card holders in certain circumstances. Yes, you heard that correctly. Even permanent residents can be affected by these new rules, which is virtually unprecedented in modern U.S. immigration history. Let me explain how this works for different categories of people. If you're on a temporary visa, whether that's an H-1B work visa, an F-1 student visa, a tourist visa, or any other non-immigrant category, and you're a national of one of the designated high-risk countries, you now face significantly increased scrutiny every time you travel. The new rules require additional vetting procedures, extended waiting periods for visa renewals, and in some cases, mandatory in-person interviews, even for routine renewals that would previously have been handled by mail. More concerning still, the regulations give border officials much broader discretion to deny entry or require additional documentation. What this means in practice is that even if you have a valid visa, even if you've traveled on that visa multiple times before without any issues, you could now be pulled aside for secondary inspection, questioned extensively, and potentially denied entry. The standards for what constitutes a security concern have been deliberately kept vague, which gives officials enormous latitude in their decisions. For green card holders, the situation is both better and worse than for visa holders. Better because permanent resident status does provide more protection and can't simply be revoked at the border in most cases. Worse because the new rules create situations where green card holders can inadvertently abandon their status or trigger automatic reviews that could lead to removal proceedings. Let me explain the specific travel rules for green card holders that have changed under the 2026 updates, because this is where many people are getting caught by surprise. Previously, the general rule was straightforward. As a green card holder, you could travel outside the United States for up to 6 months without any particular concerns, and even trips lasting up to a year were generally acceptable if you had good reasons and could demonstrate ongoing ties to the United States. The 2026 rules maintain these time limits on paper, but they add a new layer of complexity that many green card holders don't know about. First, there's now a mandatory registration requirement for any international travel lasting more than 30 days. You must notify U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services before you leave, providing detailed information about your travel plans, the purpose of your trip, and your expected return date. Failure to register can be grounds for additional scrutiny upon return or even initiation of abandonment proceedings. Second, and this is absolutely critical, green card holders from the designated high-risk countries face additional restrictions even on short trips. If you're a permanent resident, but you're a national of one of these countries, any international travel, even a weekend trip to Canada or Mexico, now triggers an automatic review when you return. You'll likely face extended questioning at the border, and you'll need to have documentation proving your ongoing ties to the United States. What kind of documentation? They're looking for evidence that you genuinely live in the United States and haven't abandoned your residence. This includes things like recent utility bills showing your U.S. address, evidence of employment or business activities in the U.S., children enrolled in U.S. schools, property ownership or a lease agreement, U.S. bank accounts with regular activity, and tax returns showing you're filing as a U.S. resident. If you can't produce this documentation at the border, you could be denied entry pending further investigation. Now, here's where it gets even more complicated and where people are really getting tripped up. The new rules also introduce what's called pattern analysis for frequent travelers. Border officials now have access to sophisticated databases that track not just how often you travel, but where you go, how long you stay, and what patterns emerge. If the system flags what it considers suspicious patterns, for example, spending more time outside the U.S. than inside, frequent trips to certain countries, or extended absences, even if they're under the 6-month limit, you can be pulled into secondary inspection for questioning. And here's the really frightening part. During these secondary inspections, border officials have the authority to seize your green card on the spot if they determine you've abandoned your residence. This doesn't require a formal hearing or a judge's decision. The officer at the border can make that determination then and there. You'd have the right to contest it later, but in the meantime, you've lost your status and may be denied entry to the United States. Let me give you some real-world examples of how these new rules are playing out, because understanding the practical implications is crucial. I've spoken with immigration attorneys who are handling cases right now where green card holders with completely legitimate reasons for travel are being caught in these new enforcement mechanisms. Case 1. A green card holder from Pakistan who works for a U.S. tech company was sent to the company's office in London for a 3-month assignment. He registered his travel as required, had all his documentation ready, but when he returned, he was held in secondary inspection for 6 hours. Officers questioned him extensively about his time in London, demanded to see his bank statements, proving he was still being paid to a U.S. account, and ultimately let him through with a warning that future extended trips would be viewed unfavorably. The experience was humiliating and frightening, even though he'd done nothing wrong. Case 2. A permanent resident from Egypt who travels frequently for her job in international sales found herself flagged by the pattern analysis system. Even though none of her individual trips exceeded 30 days, the cumulative time she spent outside the U.S. over a 12-month period triggered additional scrutiny. She's now been told that she needs to reduce her travel or risk her green card being questioned. Case 3, and this one is particularly troubling. A green card holder from Iran who had been living in the United States for 15 years, owns a home, has children in American schools, pays taxes, and has never had any legal issues whatsoever. He traveled to Turkey for a family wedding, registered his trip properly, was gone for just 2 weeks. When he returned, he was detained for 8 hours, questioned repeatedly about the purpose of his trip, who he met with, what was discussed. His phone was searched, his social media was reviewed, and he was ultimately admitted, but told he was now on a watch list for enhanced screening on all future travel. These aren't isolated incidents. These are patterns that immigration attorneys are seeing across the board. The new rules have created an environment where green card holders, particularly those from certain countries, are essentially second-class permanent residents. They have the legal right to live in the United States, but exercising their right to travel internationally now comes with significant risks and burdens. Now, let's talk about the new visa ban specifically, and which countries are affected. The administration has published a tiered list that categorizes countries into different levels of restriction. Tier 1 includes countries subject to a complete ban on new visa issuance, except in extraordinary circumstances. This tier includes several countries that were on the previous travel ban list but has been expanded. Tier 2 includes countries where visas are still available but subject to extreme vetting. This means additional background checks, longer processing times, and mandatory in-person interviews for all applicants, regardless of visa category. Tier 3 is where it gets interesting and where many people didn't expect to see restrictions. This tier includes countries that have high visa overstay rates or that the administration claims don't adequately cooperate with U.S. immigration enforcement. Countries in this tier face increased scrutiny and restrictions on certain types of visas, particularly B1, B2 tourist visas, and student visas. The full list of countries in each tier is available on the State Department website, and I strongly encourage you to check it. But some of the countries that have surprised people include several West African nations, some Southeast Asian countries, certain Eastern European nations, and even some Caribbean countries. The criteria for inclusion seem to be based partly on objective data, but also on political considerations and diplomatic relationships. For people who already have visas from these countries, the impact varies. If you're on a long-term visa like an H-1B and you're already in the United States, you can generally remain on that visa until it expires. However, if you leave the country, you may have difficulty getting a new visa to return. Some people are finding themselves essentially trapped. They can stay in the U.S. on their current status, but if they leave for any reason, they may not be able to come back. This creates heartbreaking situations. Imagine you're on an H-1B visa. You've been working in the United States for several years. You're building a life here, and then your parent back home becomes seriously ill. Do you travel to see them knowing you might not be able to return? Do you miss what could be your last chance to see them to protect your immigration status? These are impossible choices that people are being forced to make. Now, let's discuss the specific travel rules and requirements that all international travelers to the United States need to be aware of in 2026. First, there are new documentation requirements that apply to everyone, not just people from high-risk countries. All travelers entering the United States must now provide proof of ties to their home country or country of residence, evidence of financial means to support themselves during their stay, detailed itinerary information, including specific addresses where they'll be staying, and for longer visits, evidence of health insurance coverage. This is true even for citizens of visa waiver program countries, those nations whose citizens could previously travel to the U.S. for up to 90 days without a visa. While these travelers still don't need to obtain a visa in advance, they face much more intensive screening at the border and must be prepared to provide all this documentation. Second, there are new biometric requirements. All travelers, including U.S. citizens returning home, must now submit to facial recognition scanning, fingerprinting, and in some cases, iris scanning. This data is being stored in databases that are then used for ongoing monitoring and pattern analysis. Privacy advocates have raised serious concerns about these measures, but they're in place and they're mandatory. Third, there are new social media screening requirements. When you apply for a visa or when you enter the United States, you must now provide information about your social media accounts. Border officials can and do review these accounts, looking for anything they consider problematic. Criticism of U.S. policies, connections to people or organizations considered risky, even opinions on controversial topics. People have been denied entry based on social media posts, including posts made years ago. Fourth, for green card holders specifically, there's a new requirement to maintain updated contact information with USCIS. You must notify them within 10 days of any address change, and you must verify your information annually, even if nothing has changed. Failure to comply can result in your green card being revoked. Now, let me address something that a lot of people are asking. What can you do to protect yourself under these new rules? The answer depends on your specific situation, but there are some general strategies that apply to most people. If you're a green card holder, the most important thing is to maintain clear, demonstrable ties to the United States. This means keeping detailed records of everything that shows you're genuinely living here. Pay stubs, tax returns, utility bills, lease agreements, bank statements, children's school records, medical records, everything. Keep copies of these documents both digitally and in physical form, and have them readily accessible whenever you travel. When you do travel, keep trips as short as possible and always register extended absences as required. Before any trip, make sure your documentation is current and complete. When you return, be prepared for secondary inspection. Don't get rattled or defensive. Answer questions calmly and truthfully, and produce documentation when asked. If you're on a temporary visa, the stakes are even higher. You need to be absolutely meticulous about maintaining your status. This means keeping your employer or school informed of any changes, not working without authorization even for a single day, maintaining health insurance, keeping your passport valid, and being prepared to prove your compliance with every aspect of your visa conditions. For anyone planning to travel internationally, whether you're a green card holder, a visa holder, or a U.S. citizen, it's crucial to stay informed about the latest requirements. Immigration rules can change quickly, and what was true last month might not be true today. Check the official State Department and USCIS websites before any international travel. And if you're in any way uncertain about how the rules apply to you, consult with a qualified immigration attorney before you leave. Speaking of immigration attorneys, let me emphasize how important it is to get professional legal advice if you're affected by these changes. Immigration law is complex under the best of circumstances, and these new rules have added layers of complexity that even experienced attorneys are still figuring out. If you're facing any kind of immigration issue, whether it's a question about travel, concerns about your status, or problems at the border, don't try to navigate it alone. Many people hesitate to consult an attorney because of the cost, but the cost of making a mistake with your immigration status is infinitely higher. A 1-hour consultation with an immigration attorney might cost you a few $100s, but it could save you from losing your green card, being denied a visa, or even being placed in removal proceedings. Now, let me address some common misconceptions and myths that are circulating about these new rules, because misinformation is rampant and it's causing people to make bad decisions. Myth number 1: if I'm a green card holder, they can't take my status away. False. Green card status can absolutely be revoked if you're found to have abandoned your residence, if you commit certain crimes, or if you obtained your green card through fraud. The new rules make it easier for these determinations to be made. Myth number 2: the visa ban only affects people from Muslim countries. False. While several Muslim-majority countries are included, the 2026 ban is much broader and includes countries from every region of the world based on various criteria. Myth number 3: if I've been traveling on my green card for years without problems, I'll be fine. Not necessarily. The new pattern analysis systems are retroactive. They're looking at your entire travel history, not just recent trips. Patterns that were acceptable before might now trigger scrutiny. Myth number 4: U.S. citizens don't need to worry about these rules. Partially false. While U.S. citizens can't be denied entry to the United States, they can face enhanced screening. especially if they've traveled to certain countries or if they're traveling with family members who are affected by the new rules. Let me also address the question of what might happen to these rules in the future. Immigration policy is subject to change based on court challenges, legislative action, and future administrations. Some of these measures will almost certainly face legal challenges, and some may be modified or struck down by courts. However, unless and until that happens, these are the rules you need to follow. It's also worth noting that even if courts ultimately rule against some of these measures, that process could take years. In the meantime, the rules are in effect and are being enforced. You can't rely on potential future changes. You have to deal with the reality of today. For people who are watching this from the UK or from other countries and wondering how this affects them, the answer is it depends on your circumstances. If you're a UK citizen with no immigration status in the United States, these rules affect you primarily in terms of the documentation and screening requirements when you travel to the US as a visitor. However, if you have family members who are green card holders or visa holders, or if you're considering immigrating to the United States yourself, these changes are highly relevant. The immigration landscape has shifted dramatically, and decisions that would have made sense last year might not make sense today. What should you take away from all this? First and foremost, knowledge is power. Understanding these rules, staying informed about changes, and knowing your rights is absolutely critical. Second, documentation is everything. Keep meticulous records. Maintain clear evidence of your ties to the United States if you're a green card holder, and have everything organized and accessible. Third, when in doubt, seek professional advice. Immigration law is not something you want to DIY, especially under these new, more restrictive conditions. Fourth, be prepared for the reality that international travel as a green card holder or visa holder now involves more risk, more scrutiny, and more potential complications than it did before. If you found this information valuable, if it helped you understand the Trump immigration updates for 2026 and how they might affect you, please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to US Visa Info so you don't miss future updates on immigration, pensions, and other critical topics that affect your financial and legal security. Turn on notifications so you're alerted immediately when new information becomes available. Share this video with anyone you know who might be affected by these changes. Family members, friends, colleagues, anyone who has a green card, is on a visa, or is planning to travel to the United States. This information is too important to keep to yourself, and you might literally be saving someone from a devastating immigration mistake. Leave a comment below telling me about your situation, your questions, or your experiences with these new rules. I read every comment, and I'll do my best to point you toward resources and information that can help. If there are specific immigration topics you'd like me to cover in future videos, let me know. Your input helps me create content that's actually useful to you. Remember, your immigration status is too important to leave to chance. Stay informed, stay prepared, and don't hesitate to get professional help when you need it. I'm here at US Visa Info to help you navigate these complex systems and protect your rights. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and take care of yourself and your loved ones.